Good morning and welcome to IndyStar's Politics Live show, where we're talking about the end of the Indiana General Assembly's legislative session for 2026. Lawmakers still have more than 100 bills out that they need to still iron out the details on. We'll talk about a bunch of those big issues today. I'm Caitlin Lang, the Politics and Government Editor at IndyStar, here with Kayla Dwyer, our State House reporter, and Marissa Metter, our Breaking Politics reporter. Like I mentioned, there's lots of issues that still need to be worked out in the final days here. Lawmakers are hoping to wrap up by Friday. Who knows what time that will be? But I want to start out by looking backwards. The session technically started when lawmakers were discussing redistricting with President Donald Trump's push to Indiana lawmakers to redistrict. That obviously didn't make it through. It didn't pass. Have we felt any of those lingering effects, though, throughout this legislative session from that?
Yeah, a little bit. Like, I would say it, largely in terms of topics and vibes, the General Assembly has largely moved on from that. But there are a few things. I mean, at the very beginning, there was a tiny leadership shakeup. Senator Liz Brown, who has one of those like lower ranking leadership positions, was upset that the Senate didn't move forward with redistricting. So she, in protest, quit that leadership position. Then she was removed as a committee chair. So that was a little kerfuffle, right?
I honestly forgot that happened. That's how long the session has been.
I know, how long and how short, right? And then bill-wise, there were a few. I think the most prominent bill that relates to redistricting, one of those ancillary topics, is a doxing bill, making doxing a crime. This is related, obviously, because some lawmakers were doxed, and there were bomb threats against them, particularly lawmakers who were anti-redistricting. So, and I think there was language added in very recently that makes it a felony to dox a lawmaker in particular. So it's like really hitting the nail on the head there with this redistricting tie-in. There was another one about, paid protester, or seemingly targeting paid protesters and having people who are getting paid to influence lawmakers, making sure they file reports with the Lobby Registration Commission. There's some loose ties to the redistricting protests and stuff there, but otherwise, those are the big things on my brain.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I noticed, at least, was less about specific topics, but more about how quickly everything moved. Because lawmakers came into session weeks early, they decided, okay, we'll cut some time off from the back end, which meant that they are going to be ending 2 weeks earlier. And so they pushed up all their deadlines. It feels like they're doing just as many bills, and they haven't really cut back on issues or the substance of them. So It's a really rapid pace. I know. How late did they go last night, Marissa? I think you were watching. Was it 8 p.m.?
Yeah, it was 8 p.m.
Yeah,
and it's Monday.
Yeah, it's Monday, so we have a long week ahead of us. But so I think that's what not surprised me, I guess, but been so different about this legislative session from past ones, and that's thanks to redistricting for sure.
The hallway's feeling it. Everyone's like, oof.
Yes. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, we still have a lot to do before we adjourn. Marissa, what are some of the major outstanding issues that you're personally looking out for these final days?
Yeah, I'm looking out for this bill that would transform public education in Indianapolis. There are a lot of little details that weren't worked out when this process began, and they've been slowly chipping away at it with amendments each time. And so I'd be really curious to see if anything gets added in the last minute. There are different interest groups that have a stake in this that are really trying to push the legislation toward their way.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain, I think this IPS bill is one of those bills that maybe the average person isn't paying super close to because it's kind of wonky. It's creating a new board. Can you explain why this is so important?
Yeah, so it's kind of been this really long-standing debate between charter schools and traditional public schools, and this new board, which would be appointed by the mayor, all the members of the board, could have the power to sort of shift that in one direction or the other through the operational control it would have, levying property taxes through referendums, sharing the revenue with charter schools, closing schools that are underutilized. And some people, especially proponents of traditional public schools, fear that it could shift Indianapolis toward a more charter expansion.
Wow, fascinating. I guess, does it matter that the mayor has so much power under this structure? Does that seem to be a sticky point at all? Is this a Republican versus Democrat thing? Like, what are the partisan lines on this bill?
Yeah, there aren't really clear partisan lines. It's kind of a weird coalition of free market conservatives and education reformers who consider themselves progressive and think that this new form of school can help kind of close the achievement gap. But that really is a key sticking point, the mayor-appointed board aspect, because a lot of people feel like it's blatantly undemocratic, particularly when the mayor's elected by people outside of the borders of the IPS school district. So people who don't even have a stake in the school part will still get to decide the person who's controlling all the school stuff.
Wow, yeah, that's fascinating. Kayla, what about you? What is a major issue that you're looking out for that still needs to be ironed out in these final days?
Well, the running joke in this office of ours is that I've become the Chicago Bears reporter.
Which we are not sports people at all.
So that's pretty top of mind. It's top of mind for a lot of people. I just heard it on NPR this morning. So, you know, obviously this has been a discussion since that, you know, surprise open letter from the team president looking for a new place to build their stadium. And then just last week, our legislative leaders, via an amendment to a bill that creates the stadium authority, announced the outlines of a deal, and I put deal in air quotes because like nothing's signed. This is kind of like a verbal commitment between the Bears and our leaders in Indiana to say we want to locate a stadium in Hammond, and the finances that would make that happen are outlined in this Senate Bill 27. So the big question, and legislative leaders like the Senator Rod Bray, House Speaker Todd Houston, have both said, like, ideally we're trying to get to a real deal before the end of session, and like get that really like on paper. So I think that's the big question: is like, is that actually going to be a real thing? Because a lot of people are skeptical. You know, the Illinois governor is out there saying the Chicago Bears are telling them something and telling us something different. This really could be a negotiation, one big negotiation tactic, and we're a pawn. Who knows?
Yeah. I think it was interesting. I know that the Illinois governor was kind of claiming that Indiana lawmakers had told the Bears to put out this statement. Lawmakers are, of course, saying, no, that's not what happened.
Very strongly saying that's absolutely untrue, but anyway.
Yeah, I guess, you know, bottom line, how likely do you think it is that we will actually get a Bears stadium? I know there's so many moving parts here, but
I really just feel like this is all business and this is all negotiations. Like, no matter how strongly of a you know, they had a big pomp and circumstance press conference in, announcing this proverbial deal. I just still think at the end of the day, the Bears are going to do what's best for their fans and their bottom line, and that could be Indiana and that could be Illinois, and it's like a toss-up in my brain.
yeah, I think it is funny how we emphasize this is not a done deal.
Yeah.
And I know the day that this press conference happened, like Kayla and I were messaging each other like, wait, is this happening?
Right.
Is it not?
The verbiage was careful.
So I'm very intrigued to see what ends up happening with this one. One of the more common themes that emerges every legislative session is this local control fight, you know, of state versus local control, whether it's Indy or whether it's Hamilton County. We see it every year. This year's kind of focused on crime, it seemed like, in Indianapolis. I guess, why do you think that was, Kayla?
Well, I think crime is always top of mind in an election year, which we're sort of in one. It's not the most exciting election year, but nonetheless. In Indianapolis, we had a couple of high-profile incidents over the summer involving youth gun violence, and but especially I think one of the bigger influences on this is the national conversation about, you know, President Donald Trump's administration is ramping up the presence of federal law enforcement in cities, and sort of in some cases usurping the will of those local officials in those cities, and or as that's how they would put it. So I think this is both this is a national theme too. This sort of tug of war between federal and local control. And some of those themes are popping up here. Obviously, the immigration discussion and to what degree do our locals have to comply is one of the biggest bills this session. To what degree can our Indiana National Guard help police make local arrests, and to the extent that local police have that power? And what would that be used for? All of these discussions are coloring that bill. Homelessness continues to be a problem in Indianapolis, and even the advocates will tell you that. But now there's this sort of solution coming from an outside interest group that involves, levying criminal punishments that could come with jail time as a way to connect people to services. So, there are problems and there are solutions being proffered that locals really don't like. And that is a tale as old as time, but I think all of these topics are pretty top of mind right now.
Yeah. I know you obviously mentioned a few there. There was also another bill that kind of ties into all that about the Civilian Police Board.
Yeah.
Have you been tracking that one at all? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and that's interesting because that came about from to back up, in the 2020 George Floyd police reform era, the Indianapolis created this General Orders Board. It's a citizen board. There are also cops on the board that oversee and have approval power over Indianapolis Police Department's policies and how they, use of force, how they conduct themselves. And there's a bill this session that is moving along, probably going to pass, to make them advisory only, which takes us back to essentially pre-George Floyd era, right? There's tons of boards that are advisory, and so the impetus for this was this is something that the Republican minority in the city council tried to do on their own and couldn't get it passed, and they found a Republican senator from Indianapolis who was willing to make a bill about it. But this is again playing into that theme of the state coming in to do something that they think the locals should have done on their own.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's been more than crime on those things. There's been, I know there was also a bill about what billboards could be in Indianapolis.
Oh, yeah.
There's another bill that I believe is still alive that would restrict how Indianapolis uses road funding, amid concerns that city councilors are kind of helping dictate where road funding gets spent. So there's definitely other bills, but it does seem like crime has been top of mind.
Yeah.
Marissa, Kayla had touched briefly on immigration. That's been a huge topic this session, arguably maybe one of the more important ones, I'd say. Can you talk me through some of those immigration bills that have been either popped up from the beginning or popped up as we've been going on?
Yeah, so at the beginning of session, there were two main immigration bills, one on the Senate side and one in the House. And one was far more strict. It got a lot of support from Attorney General Todd Rokita, who would be sort of the main enforcer under both of the bills, really. And that more, strict bill was even lauded by Donald Trump's administration as the gold standard. And so that that didn't advance, but it got wrapped into Senator Liz Brown's bill to make that one sort of the more strict immigration enforcement bill. And that would essentially require schools, hospitals, local governments, colleges to not adopt any policy, written or unwritten, that would restrict immigration enforcement. Some people have been concerned that written or unwritten phrase could kind of give the Attorney General the power to pursue action against colleges, local governments, what have you, and to not really give them a good defense. If you can't point to, I didn't have a written policy on that, So that's kind of been the sticking point there.
Yeah, that makes sense. There was another one that popped up too. Obviously, the immigration enforcement, that's the big one, and it's been on concurrences, up for a potential concurrence vote for, I don't know, a week now.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a signal that it's in trouble. I think it's simply that lawmakers are running out of time, but we'll see when we get to it. But the other issue that has popped up has been this focus on immigrant truck drivers, since we've had some crashes recently where the driver, was an immigrant. What does the legislation on that look like, Marissa?
Yeah, so it started out mainly as an agency bill that had one provision about requiring English proficiency for truck drivers, which that kind of just mirrored federal changes that President Donald Trump had made. But after a death in early February involving a truck driver who was an undocumented immigrant, lawmakers decided to add more language into the bill, adding stricter penalties for presenting a false CDL. And so that's kind of just been gaining momentum because of all of the attention on these fatal accidents. But yeah, it's getting national attention too. The president has talked about some of these incidents in Indiana.
Wow. Fascinating. I want to go back to the local control fight aspect of things. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not just Marion County that this happens to. It's often Hamilton County that gets kind of frustrated by some of these things, even though Hamilton County is run by Republicans. The State House is ran by Republicans. Hamilton County had its own fight this year. Kayla, can you explain what that fight has been?
Yeah, and actually it might help to start looking at this from last year, because there was a language slipped into a bill last year to try to prevent Carmel and Fishers from passing an ordinance that would restrict the number of rental properties that can be in a particular neighborhood. And that was pushed by the apartment association, the realtors, a few interest groups like that. That was taken out, so then Carmel and Fishers passed their ordinance. They've been working on this for a couple years, and now there's language once again via amendment, kind of late in the process, slipped into a bill to nullify those ordinances. Yeah, you can say the Carmel and Fishers mayors are pretty upset.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this language, you mentioned it was slipped in.
Yeah.
It was, Department of Local Government Finance was the topic of that bill. It's an agency bill.
Yeah.
And we didn't find out that this language had been added in until weeks later, I think. And, we try to keep tabs on things. We have a Hamilton County reporter. So I think that just kind of goes to show that, this was kind of under the radar. And now this bill, House Bill, I think it's 1210, has become this 700-page Christmas tree bill that's almost 3 times as long as the budget bill last year. This is unprecedentedly long, basically, for a bill. It also now contains language about data centers. Marissa, can you explain that data center language and how that ended up here?
Yeah, so the language would basically require data centers in the future that get a sales tax exemption from the state to provide 1% of their sales tax savings to the local governments where they locate. It's kind of supposed to be a little carrot for these local governments who might be a little hesitant about bringing in a data center. And although 1% may sound small, when it's huge billion-dollar investments like Amazon, it can start to add up, especially if you're a small or rural community. And so that language was originally in a bill that died because it had some other controversial language about permitting. It got shifted into this, as you said, 700-page Christmas tree bill and kind of flew under the radar because of that.
Yeah. Data centers in general have been a really hot topic. We've seen a lot of pushback on a lot of the ones that have been offered throughout Indiana, and especially here in Indianapolis. It's interesting that this is the only provision that's moving forward, and it's kind of a pro-data center provision, I would say. Why do you think that's the only bill that's moving forward when there's such debate on it?
Yeah, it's really fascinating because there seems to be a divide within the Republican Party between these traditional Republicans who see data centers as an economic development engine and more populist Republicans who are a little bit suspicious of data centers. They want to pause, study it. There are several bills that would have studied the impacts on electricity, on prices, on water, but none of those really moved. And so it really seems like the movers and shakers in the State House are firmly on that more traditional side and want to see data centers in Indiana.
Yeah.
They did get enough Republican support for a Delaney amendment, or a Democratic amendment on a bill the other day to do a data center study.
Oh.
The Indiana Finance Authority has to do one now this year. Just about like the tax incentives and the financial impacts and the water and environmental impacts. So there's interest in that.
Should we take bets on if that ends up in the final bill, though? Yeah, a lot of times these Democrat amendments, sometimes they'll get approved and then they're nowhere to be found.
In conference committee, they're gone,
Yeah, so I'll be curious.
That's a good point.
I could be wrong, but I'll be curious to see if that makes it in. There's always surprise issues that pop up every legislative session. This year, it sadly happened to be after the death of the Fishers teenager, Haley Busby. I think it made lawmakers kind of think, how can we help our youth, actually do something to protect them? Marissa, how did that death impact discussions at the State House?
Yeah, so from the beginning, lawmakers have been concerned about social media and kind of wanting to tamp down on it, but they took that language out, a bill that would essentially ban social media for minors. But after the death of Haley Busby, that language was added back in and accompanied by very emotional testimony from her parents. The bill would try to help youth by not necessarily banning, but restricting social media access for people under 17. But not only that, lawmakers also specifically added a provision to kind of close the gap that some advocates say sort of made it harder to more quickly search for Busby in Indiana's alert system. They added that amendment to another bill.
Now, the social media piece, that bill, in the final days of the legislative session, things get chaotic. You have bill language moving into other bills, things dying, things being resurrected, chaos. What's the status, Kayla, of that social media language? Because my understanding is it might be moving?
Yeah, the author of the bill where it was tucked back into dissented with what the House did. So, and I heard whispers that it was over concerns of germaneness, a fancy word for not being related enough to the bill at hand, the underlying bill. So, but Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray expressed his desire to find a home for it somewhere. So I think it will get done. It's just a matter of which bill will get put on.
Right. Another issue about children, lawmakers have returned to the topic of cell phone usage for our youth in schools. We already had a cell phone ban enacted, I think, last year. How is this any different, Kayla?
Yeah, they passed a ban on cell phone use during class time, during instructional time, to be more specific. And it did leave, the previous ban left a lot of discretion to individual teachers. They could decide, well, I want you to use phones for this educational purpose, so you can have them out. In practice, it ended up that it kind of depended what class you were in, how strict the teacher was with really enforcing a phone ban, yada yada. So lawmakers wanted to make this a little more strict because they're really hearing all the studies about distractions and effects on academics, but also effects on mental health. And so this bill this year is a bell-to-bell ban. That's what advocates call it. It just means the phone's got to be inaccessible, away, or just at home the entire school day. So this means kids won't be able to look at their phones during lunch or in passing periods. And, for the most part, it's interesting. Like, at the State House, the people that come to testify on this kind of stuff, they're all, like, really gung-ho about it. But it's not till you look at sort of the online circles or, like, talk to parents offline, and there's actually, it's pretty sensitive. People are split on this. We're, on the one hand, yes, like, of course, it probably would help kids be less distracted. On the other hand, like, we're not in the same world that we were when parents like our age were going to school. There's a lot more fear about safety and mass shootings and stuff, and so kids want to be able to reach their parents, and parents and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So I'm a parent. I have a 19-month-old or 20-month. I don't know. I can't keep track. I don't know how old my child is. But even to your point about it being a different world, like I have a daycare app where it tells me when she's eaten, what she's played with at this time.
We are way more connected than we used to
Yes.
be.
So I just I don't know. I've been trying to think about this debate of how would I feel when she's in high school, and so I do think it's really more complicated.
And it's not even partisan. Like there's rifts within the parties about this. So
Yeah.
I mean, the bill is passing relatively easily so far, but it's not it's not your typical 40-10 vote in the Senate or whatever.
Right, totally. I want to change gears. Every year we see a bunch of cultural war issues pop up. What are the big ones that have popped up this year, Kayla?
I would say that the two biggies that come to mind initially are an attempt to close what pro-life advocates see as a loophole in Indiana's abortion ban, which is these abortion-inducing drugs that people can order online or from a provider in a different state. So there was a bill to try to ban those kinds of pills from being shipped to Indiana residents. That died. Could pop up somewhere else. Who knows? Also, there's a bill dealing with trying to codify in Indiana law what gender identity is and means, and that this idea among the bill authors hold, which is that there are only two genders and there should be recognized only two genders in Indiana law. So that's like your license, anywhere where you interact with the government system. And that's also maybe died, but could come back. Seems to be rumored to be trying to come back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, legislation can be resurrected. A lot of times lawmakers, if it passes one chamber, they're a little bit more, eager, I should say, to slip it in somewhere. What is that a bill that you would expect to come back, Marissa? Or are there other bills that you would think might be resurrected before this is all over?
If I had to bet money, I would definitely place my bets on that gender bill coming back in. There was a lot of frustration from advocates of the bill when they saw that it died. And it's kind of renewed this call that, the Senate isn't, conservative enough, even though it didn't even die in the Senate. But there definitely is a little bit of momentum to add that back into some sort of bill, particularly the part that would ban transgender people from going to the restroom that matches their gender identity on college campuses or in schools. That was really contentious. It got a lot of pushback, but it also seems to be the provision that advocates like the most.
Got it. And isn't believe Micah Beckwith's been advocating for this too, right?
Yes. Micah Beckwith specifically has said that there are efforts to resurrect language.
Gotcha. Okay. Kayla, what about you? What do you think could or couldn't be resurrected?
Well, yesterday the bill to try to make illegal these like off-brand marijuana products, Delta 8, things that come from what the federal government considers hemp. That's a whole bag of worms. Wax, worms, whatever. Anyway, so that died because the bill author on the House side didn't call it to the floor for amendments, but it had passed through the Senate. The Senate leadership for years has been really intent on doing something about this explosive market that's like not quite legal, not quite illegal. You know, anyone can buy these products that, you know, in high enough doses can get you high. And like, you know, kids can get them theoretically in gas stations, yada, yada, yada. So it's definitely of big concern to a lot of people in the Senate. So if it came back in some other bill form, I wouldn't be surprised, because they've really wanted to get something passed for a couple years now on this.
Is it too complex, though, for, again, such a short session?
Well, it is complex, but the federal government, Congress almost gave us a framework for this,
Right,
because they, I think it was right before the new year, they passed a law that closes whatever loophole created this whole explosion. And that takes effect in November. So, you know, this bill that just died, all it really did was align us with that incoming federal law. So, you know, in some ways, Congress did the work for us.
Right. So I guess, yeah, is it more of, it's kind of like weed in other states where it's like illegal federally, legal-ish here at the state level if this doesn't pass?
That's right. You know, if this doesn't pass, essentially, yeah, you're operating in this weird legal limbo. And that has some taxing implications too for these businesses that currently make these products here in Indiana. You suddenly won't qualify for certain like tax benefits or something. Don't ask me what the numbers are, but there are complications to being in conflict with federal law.
Marissa, I want to wrap up soon. I want to end with you. This is your first legislative session that you've covered, and you've done a great job. What has surprised you the most?
I would say it's always fascinating to me because obviously when you're not watching it, you just see stuff online, you see the stories or the clips of these super contentious debates. And trust me, there are some testy moments. But sometimes the next day it'll be, you know, all buddy-buddy, you know, compliments. I do think that there is a sense of camaraderie that crosses party lines, and I thought that was kind of surprising to see, and maybe a good thing.
Yeah, that's nice. I love that. All right, well, we're wrapping up, but the last question, obviously, we have to guess what time they're going to end. When will session actually wrap up? Kayla, what are you thinking? Again, they're expecting to end Friday, but they don't technically have to. So what is your guess on when they might wrap up?
I'm going to say 10 p.m. Friday.
Wow, okay. Marissa, do you have a guess?
I'm going to say 11:15 p.m. Friday.
That is very specific. I'm going with 1 a.m. Saturday morning. And I feel confident that I'm going to be right. Okay. So we'll see.
I hope you're wrong.
Yeah, me too. Well, thanks for joining us. That's a wrap on our IndyStar live show as we talked about the end of the legislative session. Keep coming back to IndyStar.com to see the latest on what bills are moving and what dies as lawmakers wrap up.